is so personal. It's not what you would expect from a Supreme Court justice. You said when you wrote it to hold on to the real Sonia.
Yes.
So did you succeed on your own terms?
I think so. I've told my friends that if I get too full of myself, I wrote a really thick book so you could hit me over the head with it.
The hardcover one.
The hardcover one, exactly. And they've promised me they will. But you should know something about my friends. They would have anyway. But
she's been called the People's Justice, one who throws out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium. Hangs out on The View.
Call me Sonia.
And just last weekend, there's Sonia Sotomayor shopping at Costco. And you run right into Hillary Clinton.
It was not planned, I can assure
Promise.
you. I promise. Everybody's telling me there were signs out front. And I went through the side door, so there were no signs at the side door. Hence, I didn't know. And a nice lady at the pharmacy counter recognized me, and we started chatting, and she says, "Are you here with the other lady?" And I said, "What other lady?" And she mentioned Madam Secretary. And that's how I found out.
One more surprise on a remarkable and riveting journey. The girl who soared from the Bronx projects to Princeton. A young prosecutor, federal judge, and then the first Hispanic justice on the Supreme Court.
Congratulations and welcome to the court.
Every case, almost by definition, that you end up dealing with is a matter of great national importance.
Absolutely. It's a horribly big question. We are not doing things that make everyone happy. For every winner, there's a loser in a court case.
You said one of the first times you realize that things break down is when people lose the ability to imagine the other person's
side. And I try very hard not to lose that here. Because you have to understand, every justice is passionate about the same thing. We're passionate about the Constitution. You see it in our opinions and in moments where we're sort of sparring with each other.
Seems like you're getting more sharp.
That's what everybody's saying. I think that's a little bit a product of style. Some of my colleagues have a more pugnacious writing style than others.
Justice Scalia?
Well, no, we've got others too. And it can be fun sometimes to spar.
Fiery too. Especially on the hot-button issue of affirmative action. When the court recently upheld a ban on racial preferences for college admissions, Sotomayor spoke out from the bench in dissent for the first time. Just a couple of months earlier, he had said he didn't think that was a very good practice. So what changed?
Linda Greenhouse,
the Supreme Court reporter.
The Supreme Court reporter who pointed me to an article that argued for the pros of speaking dissents from the bench.
So what was the argument that convinced you?
The argument was that it signals to the public, in a way that nothing else does, that the question is different than what the majority has thought. And I realize that in this fast-paced internet world, reporters are no longer reading about cases before they comment on them.
For this justice, it's deeply personal. She knows affirmative action made a difference for her and believes it's still necessary today. There's been a lot of scholarly work now that now say, you know what, it's just not the best way to ensure diversity in schools. And maybe if you focus on where people live and how much money they make, you can get the same results in a way that is less fractious.
Well, the problem with that answer is that it doesn't work.
You just don't believe it works.
Oh, it's not that I don't believe it works. I don't think the statistics show it works. Just doesn't. If you start from the proposition that advantage inures to a background that's privileged, and it does. Look, we have legacy admissions. If your parents or your grandparents have been to that school, they're going to give you an advantage in getting into the school again. Legacy admission is a wonderful thing because it means even if you're not as qualified as others, you're going to get that slight advantage. But what does qualifications mean in an academic setting? A place like Princeton could fill their entire beginning freshman class with students who have scored perfectly on undergraduate metrics. They don't do it because it would not make for a diverse class on the metrics that they think are important for success in life.
I remember talking to President Obama about this a few years back. He's a supporter of affirmative action. He conceded that, for example, his daughters shouldn't get any special consideration for their race because they've had so many other privileges.
I agree. But even privileged people will show you dramatic accomplishment that doesn't go just to grades.
You also write in your book about some of the sexism you face even as a prosecutor. Any as a Supreme Court justice, or does it go away?
It hasn't happened in a while where someone called me honey. But, you know, people did when I was on the federal bench below.
On the federal bench?
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure that the marshal who called me honey thought it was a term of endearment, but I'm equally sure that he would not find a term of endearment or use it for a male judge.
And on a Supreme Court dominated for generations by men, she is now one of 3 female justices. We talked about the difference a woman justice makes. Do you think a woman president would make a big difference?
Oh, probably at least in some little girl's perceptions of herself. And that's important to know.
And you've seen that as a justice.
I've seen it as a justice. I can't tell you the letters I've gotten from children talking about the impression that having me on the court has made on them.
Part of a legacy still being written. You write at the end of the book, there are many more stories to tell before I can begin to say definitively who I am as a judge. You've been a judge for more than 20 years. You can't say who you are.
But it's changing every day. My colleague, Justice John Paul Stevens, who I adore and think the world of, talks openly about the many opinions he's issued that he would write differently today. I hope that I will be able to point to the things that I got wrong and felt over time with experience and greater knowledge that I was flexible enough to admit that I was wrong then and that I've gotten a better opinion today.
That is for later. I'd love to come back and talk to you about that.
In 20 years, you might.
Okay. Justice Sotomayor, thank you very much.
Thank you, and I hope I'm here 20 years from now.